Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Warhammer 40k Boltgun. 40k boomer shooter sounds like a game made specifically for me, but with tons of great retro shooters on the market, does Boltgun stand with them or behind them? Let's find out. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is a retro-style shooter complete with retro-inspired graphics, set in the 40k universe with plenty of booming, shooting, and chainsaw sorting. You play as a space marine, the Emperor's finest, and tech priests have screwed stuff up as usual, so it's now up to you to go to a variety of locations, purging all the chaos possible, mostly Tzeentch and Nurgle, and keep purging until there are no more Xenos left. The gameplay is straight classic boomer shooter, no strings attached. What, modern shooters had skill trees? Pfft, the Emperor made his Marines perfect, you don't need that. What, modern shooters had weapon-specific weaknesses for enemies? Pfft, the Emperor made all weapons equal, so use whatever you want as long as it's purging with extreme violence. It is basic in nearly every sense. Well, except two wrinkles. First, you do have one ability, a slightly delayed dash, which can only go forward and has a recharge. I almost never use this thanks to the other ability, your chainsword. The chainsword is no ordinary weapon, it is designed to obliterate heresy. While you can just melee like a pleb, holding it and targeting an enemy before releasing will dash you towards the enemy, basically a warp, and then holding it while attacking will rev it in their squishy bits for massive damage. Aside from the high mobility sword, you have a bunch of classic Warhammer guns, from the aforementioned bolter, which is your workhorse, a somewhat disappointing shotgun, a plasma gun that's kind of a baby rocket launcher, and more. While the arsenal doesn't really feel as distinct as it probably should, it does allow for some variety. Levels start linear but get more maze-like as the game goes on, following the Doom tradition of sending you to find keys that you'll use to unlock doors that you have to backtrack to. Each chapter also has a boss at the end, which is basically just a bigger enemy with more health, and speaking of enemies, there's quite a variety here, from the lowly cultists and Nurglings to chosen, chaos sorcerers, and big Nurgle frogs. Also flamers. I hate Tzeentch flamers. And honestly, not much more to say about Boltgun because it is extremely basic. It forgoes any attempt to alter the classic boomer shooty formula in lieu of fairly traditional Doom-esque shooting with lots of blood, guts, and 40k flavor. So what did I like about Boltgun? Well, the core shooting here feels solid, with a few tweaks. Pro tip, turn running on and never turn it off, with the titular bolter in particular feeling very punchy, and enemies dying in very satisfying bloody ways. Additionally, the chainsword adds a great dynamic of being able to basically teleport lunge into or around encounters quickly, and providing a great mix of mobility and damage. And lastly, I think this game looks fantastic, finding that great hybrid between retro pixel style and modern 3D environments like Proteus, and that tons of 40k flavor are icing on the cake. When it comes to the bad, enemies beyond the basic grunts are way too bullet spongy. Enjoy this clip of me killing a frog at the start of chapter 2 as an example. It really kills the pacing, and paired with enemy prioritization not really being as important, makes the combat feel repetitive. And speaking of repetitive, this game basically shows you all it has to offer in the first chapter, with the remaining 2/3 of the game filled with similar enemies, combat encounters, and so on without offering anything new or particularly interesting. And lastly, the lack of an auto map is incredibly frustrating. While the early linear levels are fine, the later ones are maze-like, and with the game doing a pretty awful job signposting the primary route, the lack of any map means you can be wandering around for quite a while, frustrated on where to go next. As you know, I rate games here on a 3-point scale, must play, maybe consider, don't bother. And I'll be honest, as someone looking forward to this game immensely, I was a bit let down. The core shooting and arsenal here are fantastic, as is the aesthetic, but it is bogged down by some really poorly designed maps, spongy enemies, and just some amateurish design decisions. It reminds me a bit of that game Forgive Me Father, which I also really wanted to love but stumbled in too many basic ways for me to highly recommend. I do think if you love 40k and boomer shooters, this is still a fun time, as long as you temper your expectations and expect more than a little frustration. And that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you played Boltgun, what's your favorite boomer shooter? Please let me know in the comments, but regardless, go out there and give Boltgun a look.